Luke is going to introduce us and explain to us how we can basically socially engineer, it sounds like, the leadership into supporting our program. So Luke, I'm very interested in this talk. The floor is virtually yours.
Awesome. Awesome. All right. Well, I hope everybody's enjoying the summit so far. We've got 30 minutes, so I'm going to go ahead and dive into this. We are going to look at how we can shape the decisions of business leaders using proven tactics. Let's see. Do I have control, Jennifer, over this? Okay, there we go. Here's the obligatory agenda. Right here. The big point is I'm going to walk you through a process. We're going to cram very complex topics into about 30 minutes here. So we're going to scratch the surface, and I'm going to focus on the process and not really the outcomes. All right. Bottom line up front, I want you to walk away with is the reality that building an InfoSec culture and building a security awareness program is difficult. And without executive support, we all know this, it's going to be slow and frustrating. And your success hinges on your ability to influence their decision-making process. So 3 things to take away if you take away nothing else. All right, the first one is that influence can be learned and refined. All right, if our professional careers depend on our ability to influence, why do we spend so little time learning how to get better at influencing other people? You're all in this training, so you're taking the first step, but most people spend very little time learning how to get better at this. Second one is that influence can be done intentionally, that the purposeful and planned use of influence can benefit your organization. And third, it can be done ethically. All right, you can hack ethically or unethically. In the same way for influence. Influence has become a dirty word in our culture. It's become kind of an expletive. All right, but you can do this ethically, and it can be done for very specific purposes, and you can use ethical influence tactics. At the end of this brief talk, you're going to have a roadmap for ethical influence. We're going to fill all these in. All right, when we talk about influence, we're not talking about inception where we plant ideas into the subconscious minds of our targets. Or are we? Is that what we're talking about? And I'm going to leave that up to you to decide after this presentation. All right. Some context here before we dive in is that you need to understand that you're in competition for resources. You're in competition for money. You're in competition for a voice and for influence. In your organizations, everybody has a different organizations, different sizes, different power structures, different goals, but realize that you're in competition. So your ability to influence is going to be extremely important, especially as an InfoSec professional. All right, it's not always a zero-sum game. With money, it usually is. The money's either going to go to InfoSec or it's going to go to somewhere else. Influence sometimes can be shared. The last point there on influence is sometimes there's a narrative that's being pitched by someone else, and you have to change that narrative. Maybe you're coming in and there's a legacy personality or a legacy construct that you have to change. All right, so you're in competition. You have to realize that. All right, art versus a science. I call this an art because it's not a science. All right, if you can replicate the work every time you get the same outcome, it's a science. All right, the challenge with influence operations or influence tactics is that you don't always have the exact same outcome. So I'm going to focus on the process and arm you with the techniques you need rather than focus on specific outcomes. So this is an art. All right, first off, start with your end game. All right. I like acronyms. So TAPPER, all right? I want you to spend time focusing and you define your end game. You write this down. What is your target? So the target will conduct an action in order to achieve a purpose, and upon completion, it'll have a result. All right, your target is the person or group that you want to influence. The action is, what do you want them to do? Do you want them to invite you to more meetings? Do you want more of a voice? Do you want them to approve a budget? What do you want them to do? Write that down. And then what's the purpose? Why do you want them to do this? All right. And then what's the point? After this is all said and done, what type of result will it achieve in your organization? Here's an example. The CFO will approve additional funding up to 200K in order to fund a new security awareness campaign around our remote workforce. When it's all said and done, it will have increased resiliency against threats to our cloud forward company. Just a very simple example, but get that down. All right, writing that down may seem trivial, but it's not. It's important to have that documented, and we can refine it later, but it gives you something to go back to. It'll keep you on track. All right, what's the difference between a slimy manipulator or an influential leader? All right, I would argue that it's a genuine concern for the good, welfare, and development of someone or something. All right, it could be your boss, your subordinates, your company. All right, that's a difference between a manipulator or an influential leader. But you have to ensure your motives are ethical, and this is a continuous process. All right, don't skip this step. Before we go into the how, I'm going to just talk about some ethical filters. First off, I'm not your conscience. I'm not an attorney. At the end of the day, you have to live with your own decisions, right? Don't mistake anything in this presentation as a call to violate your conscience or operate outside ethical boundaries. All right, 8 filters. How do you know if what you're doing is going to be ethical? First off, very simply, is it truth or is it a lie? Are you going to try to convey a truth or a lie to someone? Lying's not okay. If it's not true, then don't do it. Is it part of your job? All right. If this influence effort initiative is going to take you too far out of your job duties, then don't do it. Right? Is this part of your formal tasking? Is this part of your job description? If this is something you're getting paid to do, then it's a good indicator that it's ethical. If you're influencing onto something that you're getting paid to do, that's a good indicator that it's ethical. All right, who benefits? Is there a corporate benefit, or is the primary focus on your personal benefit? This should have a corporate benefit above personal. All right. If your influence effort is effective and someone else gets the credit, are you going to be okay with that? Are you going to sleep soundly? If this is going to bother your conscience when you're trying to go to sleep, if it will, then don't do it. Spousal support. This is something you don't see very often. I think this is important. If I'm struggling with something, I'll ask my wife. I'll get her input, all right, on whether something is okay or not. Can I defend this to my wife, to my kids, if I got called to the carpet on it? And lastly, what's the outside optic? All right, how would this look to someone from the outside of the organization? Is there a potential that this could be used against you, either your current role or a future role, if you want to move up in your organization? All right, you need to understand culture at your company. We're not going to dive into culture too much. Lance talks about culture. A ton of smart people talk about culture. Relative to influence, you need to understand and operate within the cultural boundaries in order to be effective. All right, your influence operation has a factor in unique cultural considerations. All right, when you're trying to influence, it's not the time to buck the system or play counterculture games. All right, you need to work to integrate. All right, choose your battles wisely. No one likes someone who fights and argues about everything in a company. I don't care how big or important you are. No one likes those kind of people. You got to choose your battles wisely. Don't be divisive. Work to bring people together. And lastly, remember that InfoSec will always be a supporting function. It's there to support the business. That'll keep you humble. All right, but understand all these factors of culture at your company. Decision making. I've got 4, I call it the 4 A's. You may see these in different constructs, but when you talk about how people make decisions and what they need to consider, there's 4 steps. I call it awareness, assessment, adoption, and action. I'm a fan of alliteration. I like to line these up. All right, so the leader, the target has to understand they're going to be making a decision. All right, they have to become aware of it. They go through this cognitive process of awareness. Then they have to assess it. They go through options and they consider the facts. They maybe consider alternative options. Then they go through this phase of mental adoption where they're going to adopt your idea. They may own it. They say, yeah, it's a good idea. I like the plan. I like the vision. They own the perspective. And lastly, they take action. They do something or they don't do something. But either way, a person, a decision maker is going to go through these steps. Okay, defining your target. Who do you decide to influence? Start by listing out all your options. Determine who's the final decision maker. And maybe one, maybe more, but list them all out. You'd be surprised if you list them all out, really who has the power to make decisions. Every organization is unique. Some have more centralized power structures. Some people have the titles, but they don't have they have the formal power, but not the informal power. Some people may be switched, and every organization is different depending on your potentially your country, your state, your region, your industry can all change. Smaller companies, it's usually pretty easy to decide and identify who the target decision maker is. But there may be a need in larger organizations to have a launch pad, all right, targets that you have to hit before you get to your primary target. Something to consider. Whoever your target is, they have to be a decision maker. You'll notice in a lot of organizations, more people have the power to say no than they do to say yes. Find the people who can say yes in your organization, yes and no, all right, but not just no. All right, know the biases of your target. All right, if you know the biases of your target, you can plan another hot button issues. Know the landmines and avoid them. If you step on landmines with your target business leaders, it's going to kill your ability to influence. Learn and understand the methods and the mediums through which they receive information. Do they prefer word of mouth? Do they prefer digital communication? Do they prefer Slack? Do they prefer reading hard copy? How do they receive information? You have to know that. That way you can work to integrate your messages into those mediums. To whom do they listen? Who do they take advice from? Is it their executive assistant? Is it the COO? Is it a consultant? Find out who has the ear of your target decision maker. Listen carefully for the motives that when they're talking, they're going to potentially betray their motives, or you have to know what's influencing their decisions, their timelines, their processes. Okay, be on the lookout for common biases. Talk a lot about biases. I've got some common types here. There's obviously many more. Confirmation bias, availability bias, anchoring bias. We're going to talk about that in a minute. Bandwagon, self-serving, effect heuristic, stereotyping. Every leader has a certain bias. Right? Understand what that is so that you can play into it. Right? Some subconscious motives that may be going on at the executive level. Again, everybody's different. Every leader's different. Let's say the CFO. Are they there to protect a legacy? Are there internal power struggles on the executive team? Is there some ego and pride there? Are there revenue pressures, social agendas? Maybe they're just trying to justify their existence or prove value. Right, these are some things to think about. At the end of the day, you gotta listen and observe. Right? How do you know that? I mentioned sit in meetings, observe discussions, talk less, listen more. Right? Listen to other people, maybe other executives. How are they tailoring their messages for the target, and how are they crafting messages? Pick up on others' tactics. Read newsletters, updates they write, memos. Do some OSINT, their LinkedIn profile. Maybe they have personal blogs, articles they've written in the past. Are they involved in clubs? This is how you can know generally how people think, what their biases are, what they prefer, and what they're involved in. All right, real quick stairway here. I don't know where I got this. I got this several years ago. I call it the stairway to champion. Once you define your leader and you understand their biases, you got to plot them on this map. And the goal of your influence is to try to move them up this stairway to support whatever you want them to do. Is it approve a budget, give you money? Is it just you want more voice? You want more access to people? Right? Whatever it is, you have to move them up these layers. Most people don't skip steps. So your influence process has to move them sequentially up these steps, where eventually they're a champion for you. Okay, craft a compelling message. 6 tips on how to craft a compelling message. You've got your target, you know their biases. Your message has to be tailored to them. It can't be generic. It has to factor in everything we discussed in the past. It's got to be uniquely tailored for the way and the methods they receive information. It's got to be timely, coordinated. It's got to be consistent. It can't be contradictory. All right, it's got to be ethical, talked about that. And then it may need to be layered. You may have to have layers of messaging. So craft your message. What do you want them to do? Have that message written down, because you're going to have to inject it into their information environment. Okay, the most underrated skill in InfoSec leadership is the ability to understand and communicate exactly how InfoSec efforts support the business. In every organization, this can be different. This is uniquely hard. All right. And we've heard this in the past, and it's become kind of trite to say this, But here are some things to think about. The most obvious one is you actually have to know the business goals, know what the business is trying to accomplish. Second, know the financial health of the company. If you're asking for 200K, for example, know if that's going to be a reasonable ask, right? Know the financial outlook, know the health. All right, no budget timelines. Don't ask for money off budget. Every company has a process and a timeline in which they approve budgets, right? Know those and then work to integrate it in there. And lastly, know the ROI. If it's the CFO, for example, know their preferred method on measuring return on investment. Understand these things and connect your message to the business goals and factor these aspects in there as well. All right, see, think, do. Work backwards. If we want them to do something, they have to think about something. If they think about it, they have to see it. What do they need to see? Let them see you tick. Teamwork, involvement, commitment, and competency. Let them see you involved in the team. Let them see you involved in the day-to-day, all right? More than just InfoSec. Let them see your commitment, right? It's unlikely you're gonna have the ability to influence after 2 weeks of being a company. They need to see you're committed. These leaders need to see that you're vested in the success of the company. And lastly, you gotta be competent. You have to be able to do your job. They need to see and believe in your competency. And a tip, don't be a jerk, right? Never underestimate the power of likability in getting people to do what you want them to do. All right, I've got 10 steps on how to create influence opportunities. These are just more bullet points, if you will. These aren't sequential. Ideas on how to create influence to your target leader. Once you've identified your target leader, how do you get that message to them? First off, join non-InfoSec related committees. Right? Build relationships with other functional groups, marketing, sales, engineering. You have to put your tentacles in all these different areas of the company so that you have influence there and you can use those other leaders as conduits to your ultimate target leader. Volunteer for stuff, take on extra work. Attend corporate functions and events. All right, be ready with your messaging theme. Corporate functions and events, I know have slowed down with COVID. It's a little harder, but think about holiday parties, think about promotion parties, right? These are awesome opportunities to build rapport and credibility with business leaders. All right, build relationships with non-InfoSec staff. All right, be seen. I say get out of your cube, basement, office, walk around. Again, COVID, make an effort as much as you can, the digital realm with Zoom. I know everybody's tired of Zooms, but engage with other people, all right? Build those relationships. It's going to strengthen your ability to influence. Increase the probability of run-ins to build rapport. All right, once you've identified this person, know their cadence. Where do they go? Do they go to places for coffee, lunch? Then you schedule time to run into them. Use that as an opportunity to get your message to them. All right. Don't immediately jump right into it. Let it unfold naturally. Maybe wait 2 or 3 times of running into them coincidentally. All right. That you go into your message, your ask. This helps them build trust. Got that quote there. The deepest urge in human nature is the desire to be important. All right. Make your target feel important. You run into them, find ways to make them feel important. All right. Inform up. All right. Send newsletters or send emails of what you're doing. Copy other business leaders. Again, this can be unique in every company, but find a way to inform up so that they see your competence. All right, let them know what you're working on. Let them know what's coming down the pipeline. Let them know what they could be doing. This is going to build trust with the target's peers. So maybe you're building trust with other members of the executive team, and they can be an advocate for you. One approach is essentially numb them into indifference, flooding them with information. They eventually maybe become less antagonistic and maybe just become indifferent. They won't oppose what you're trying to do. So it's one way to move them up, just an option. I use that in a very discerning way. The magic of 3, right? 3 points of affirmation to get them to believe something. 3 sources of information will get them to believe it, and 3 times to hear or see the same message. So I say 3 sources. Take, for example, they see an email that you send them. They hear a presentation or speech that you gave. have one of their peers, maybe the COO vouches for you, right? So they hear 3 points of information from 3 sources, and it's going to make them believe that you are trustworthy. It's going to make them believe your message. Okay, apply the principle of first truth. Going back to the anchoring bias is that people are over reliant on the first piece of information that they hear or see. We all are like this. It's harder to convince us otherwise. So in the event that the context supports it, you want to be the first one to convey your message, your plan, how to spend this money. What is it going to go toward? All right. You want to have that message first. And then in the target leader's mind, it's going to be hard to convince them otherwise. That's called the principle of first truth. Okay. In the event that you've got opposing messaging coming from antagonists, maybe there's someone in your company who is competing for funds, maybe someone doesn't like you, someone threatened by your success, you have to keep them close. You gotta have a pulse on what type of messages they're sending, and you have to counter those. You can ghost them. You can address their messages in content without naming them specifically. Ask for an introduction in the event that you don't know them before a cold introduction. And lastly here, look for a seemingly disinterested third party. This is called the unlikely alliance. If you can get someone else to vouch for you, to convey your message apart from you, all right, it's a force multiplier. And I've got a quick example on that. Let's say it's the VP of sales. You want to convey, you're trying to start a new security initiative, whatever that is. Maybe you convince the VP of sales it's good for his distributed sales team. It's going to protect them, help them generate more money. Then you get the VP of sales to talk to the CFO. Right? It's an unlikely alliance. It's another way, it's another conduit to get a message to the CFO, your target. Got a passive approach and a direct approach. Y'all can read these later. Okay. Once you've creating your influence, once you begin injecting your message, watch for indicators that it's working. I've got some ideas here on how to know if your influence plan is working. One is you begin to see your message repeated by your colleagues or your target leaders. They start repeating the message like, okay, this is my theme. I'm starting to hear them say it and talk about it. That means it's working. That means you've got into their decision-making process, right? You start getting maybe more invites to the table, to meetings. You start getting requests for more information. And lastly is your target starts repeating the message as if it's their own idea. This is the pinnacle of successful influence, right? When they say an idea, hey, we need to do this, and they just say, I had this idea. That means you've gotten to their mind. They believe it's their idea, and this is success, all right? Resist the urge to take credit. Right? Let them believe it was their idea, okay? Just be content knowing that your plan worked. Okay, as we wrap up here, here's a roadmap for successful influence. Define your end game, tapper. Use the ethical filters. Make sure that these messages are ethical. Right? Know the culture, know the decision process, define and refine your target, know your decision makers, ascertain biases, see, think, do, let them see you tick, teamwork, involvement, commitment, and competency. Craft your message. It's got to be tailored, timely, coordinated, consistent, ethical, and layered. Create those influence opportunities. Use those ideas. There's probably more awesome ideas out there that I didn't put for sake of time. There's a lot of them out there, but you have to create influence opportunities. And lastly, watch for the effects. Refine them. Once it's working, you reinforce it. If it's not working, you can refine it. I'm going to close here with what not to do. Don't view people as a means to an end, all right? Seek to build authentic, mutually beneficial relationships. Don't be impatient. This stuff can take time. Don't burn bridges, all right? Never shut down communication. Do everything you can to leave those connection channels open and the relationship conduits open. All right, don't forget your why. We talked about going and writing that down. Don't forget why you're doing this. It'll keep you on track. Don't tell people your plan. Right? Keep your cards close. You could write this out, have a disciplined process, but closely guard your plan and its contents. All right. This is gonna be OPSEC. This is operational security. It's also going to give you flexibility to adapt your plan without losing credibility. All right. You keep your plan very close hold. Don't tell people what you're doing. This is your secret on how you're going to get things done in your company. And lastly, don't be afraid to settle for adjacent or diagonal launching pads. You may have to jump around before you get to your ultimate decision maker. Know when it's strategically wise to jump around, all right? Be patient. Again, I'm going to end with this quote from President and former Army General Dwight Eisenhower. I'll tell you what leadership is. It's persuasion and conciliation and education and patience. It's long, slow, tough work. It's the only kind of leadership I know. So leaders, you have to persuade, you have to influence, and there's no easy button for this. So with that being said, I will shut it down for questions.